We are going to add a button and a screen on this video. Our goal will be to add, if I work off of my new to-do list for organization, we are going to work on the new to-do functionality. And we're going to start that off by doing a floating container icon and adding that floating at the bottom right of the screen right in here. There's a lot of mobile apps that use that technique. It's kind of a known paradigm and it looks good. So here we go. We are going to start with AppGyver. We're in the to-do list screen, in the to-do list app as well, obviously. We're going to scroll up a little bit. Actually, as we do that, let's check a few things. What I want to do is make sure that I have this list scroll view right here set up correctly. I'm going to go over to Style, Advanced Properties. Let's see where I want that info. Maybe it's in Container. Always a little bit of a search. Oh, I know where I'm going. Scroll View, Dimension and Position. There is a Show Advanced options. Okay. And so usually what we want to have, and maybe it's in the container, click there and see. Yeah, we may have to make a change here. Normally what I want to have for the scroll view, we're going to switch back over to scroll view in the advanced options so that it fills the screen, is flex grow set to 1, flex shrink set to 0, and leave the flex basis to auto. And I'm going to look at that real quick as I make that change, just to make sure that I haven't messed up anything on the app. It looks like we're still good. We've still got a good scroll. We can see the bottom item, and there's a little room below it. So I think we're good there. And I do that just to make sure that when we add what will be our button, that everything looks good. So that will be our next step. So I think what we're going to do is fix a little bit of a problem. I went dark there for a second and paused because I've learned something over the last couple of weeks that hasn't been applied to the to-do list, but in one of my other apps. And it's what I started showing you, which is if I go to the scroll view and I look at the share or the show advanced options for the dimensions and position, I had set up the flex grow and flex shrink so that it fills the whole screen. That's really the purpose of doing that. But if you notice, we have that scroll view within a container, and that's how I used to do things. And I realized that when using a scroll view, there's not as much reason to have a container because it's really just causing two levels of structure for the visual. And the reason that's going to be problematic here, let me go ahead and save, is if we go back over to the app, and this is going to be hard for you to know what's going on here, but generally, right now, I am pulling down with my finger outside of the 4 items in the list, and nothing happens. But if I pull down on the list, can you see how that list disappears halfway in the screen? And what that means is the bottom half of the screen where there are no to-dos, that scroll area doesn't reach all the way down, even though we did the flex grow to be 1. Flex grow should make it grow to the full screen. But the reason it didn't is because the container is wrapping the scroll view, and the container in the style, dimension, and position doesn't have a 1 and a 0. Now what I could do here is make this a 1 and make it a 0, just like I did for the scroll view, and everything would be better. But I think instead of doing that, what I am going to do here is move the scroll view out of the container. And so I just, over in this tree view, drug it outside until the line showed fully across, and I dropped it. And you can see it's at the same level of the container. And then I'm going to click on the container and delete it. So I think, there it is. So here's the container down here. Clicked on it, it's got the X, I'm gonna get rid of it. So now when I save this, if I pretend to know what I'm doing, you see, well, you can't see, but you have to trust. My finger is down at the bottom half of the screen, and I'm able to pull it all the way down and see what all the to-dos, make it all the way down without being cut off halfway. So that's the way we want to do scroll views going forward. There's no reason for a container. It can be done, but it makes it one more area that something can go wrong. So the key out of that is we changed the scroll view flex in the show advanced options within dimensions and position. We changed that to a 1 and a 0. I guess there's no reason I can't show you as I say it. So this is where we made this a 1, this a 0, left the auto, and everything was good. And that gives us a nice full screen. And the reason for that is on this nice full screen, we're going to do what I said we're going to do, which is we're going to add in a floating button down here at the bottom. Okay, so to do the floating button, we get into our to-do. We are going to put a container over here. We're going to go ahead and name it so we know what we've got. The floating button container. And then this container, we need to change its styling. So we are going to deal with its position. And so we went into dimension and position, we click on position. We no longer want to be top left. We now want to be bottom right. And the reason for that is we want it to be down in this corner, but there's a few other things that we need to address with this. For one, whenever you pick bottom and right, if you want them to actually have an effect, you need to set a value, not leave it unset, set an explicit value for each of their positions. Now, the other thing we need to do is down in advanced options, position relative needs to be changed to absolute. Relative means that it will just flow along with the rest of the controls. Absolute, if you notice, sticks it down in the bottom right corner, like I chose it to be. Just to show you the effect, if I come back up here and I change left, it goes to the left. But we want our button on the right. Okay, so we changed bottom right, 1 and 1. We probably want to change a little bit of the margin as well. I want it to be off the bottom a bit. I don't know, we can probably, I mean, if you know where you want it to be, you can go straight there. Let's say we do 16. So it's going to be sitting off the bottom of the screen about that much. If we're wrong, we can easily fix it. Let's see what else we have here while we're checking stuff out. So for the content, I'm going to be putting an icon in here, and I want that icon to center itself vertically and horizontally. So I select the justify content and align items. And so I think I have my space figured out. Almost. Actually, I just thought of one more thing. We want to give it a size because I don't want the content that I put in here to control its size. I want to give it, I've used this size before, 60 pixels in another app that I'm working on. So let's assume that forcing it to 60 pixels, having the margins and the position set, and having absolute set, I now have that where I want it. And so why don't we give it a color? Because right now it's not even going to show up, right? It's the same color as everything else. So in good fashion, I don't exactly remember. So we're going to go to we're going to save this. Don't remember that green color that we picked, where we put it. So I'm going to look at theme up here. And so I want to put the background color to be color informative. So when we come back in to background, I know that I can scroll down here And now it's just a matter of finding color informative, and there it is. When I pick that, I've got the color of my background. And now we are going to bring in an icon and drop it right in there. And since this is for a new item, we really don't want a star. Maybe a pencil, maybe it's, I've got to guess what it's going to be here, because there it is. I think we want to go with this pencil, but I don't really want to have a blue color to it. I want it to stand out a little bit more. So since that icon is considered a font, we're going to come into font size. Once again, I've made 132 before, so I like that. And then we're going to pick a text color, which I think is just going to be color background, and that should go to white. There we go. Now there is one thing I'm missing, because this is kind of an ugly square, and we've got our icon set up. I'm going to go back to our container, and I need to address the border. So for the border, I want it to be solid. I want it to give it a radius. Remember, to get a circle, the radius needs to be at least half the value of the width and height. So I'm just making it equal to that value, because why not? And I guess we could do color informative for the border. I don't think we're going to see any aspect of it, but just to be consistent. And then we'll save this. So at this point, I think if we go over and look at our app, there it is, since we've been saving. And if you look, it just sits there and floats. It doesn't move. And the reason for that is it's not relative, which means it's not in flow with the rest of the controls. It's an absolute position in the bottom right. And so we now have a floating button that doesn't do anything, but it's floating. So let me see if I can get credit for adding that new floating button there. You know, another option we have, and maybe we'll take a quick look and see if this makes a difference. What if we do a little bit of blur, and maybe we go with, it's usually somewhere in the card, a shadow color, which is kind of a blur. So by putting this blur in, an offset of X, turning the blur on, giving it a blur radius, and giving it a color, what you end up with is usually a nice floating effect. And if you see the difference there, just ever so slightly, you don't want too much blur, you don't want it to be obvious, but it gives it a little bit of a lift in the app. And I might be able to see it a little bit better than you, since I'm looking at the mobile phone directly. But that blur sets it up and makes it look 3D, and I think gives it a little bit better look. To be honest, this is stuff I've stole from other people and knowledge of what they've done. Mevi out in the AppGyver YouTube and forums content has done a great job of explaining how to do this. So you can always find that example in a shorter version of a video if you're interested. Okay. So if I stay responsible as a no coding developer, our goal is to use that button to launch a modal screen to allow us to add a new to-do. So that means I have to create a new screen. And since we're right here, if I click on mow the yard, right now all we have is a title and a description in our details screen. So that's really all I'm going to need to do to add a new screen, is to have those two items. So let's go back out to the screens as I get my bearings again, and go find my plus. We're going to call it new to do. And this will give us something to attach that to, attach that button to launch the screen. So this is going to be, we're going to leave that as it is. Yeah, that's right. We can almost leave this just like it is, except I need some entry fields, because we're doing, that's what I'm doing that I'm confused on. Let's get rid of all of them, not keep anything like it is. And we are going to put on a couple input fields and a button. Now you could put these in containers and I might still end up doing that, but minimally adding a button and then giving that button a little bit of margin. Let's see what it looks like with 16. There we go. We'll go with 32. Give a little bit of space with where we're typing and where we're pressing the button. A lot of the reasons I do that is just worrying about fat fingering something. If I click on label and I actually hit button, then I'm going to end up with a new to-do sooner than what I wanted. So giving a little bit of space is always kind of an important aesthetic or an important usability aspect of doing this. So this is, okay, so we've got a label and a label. I'm going to switch over to Xano. We've got a name and a description, so we'll just go with that as an option. Name, description, maybe we call this create. What do we want? To create or submit? I'm being indecisive. We'll say submit for now. We'll leave the type here alone. We'll give a little bit of space between the two. See what 16 looks like. That's not bad. That's good enough for now. And then we'll put a good amount of space on the top, maybe even like 64. That may end up being too much, but you know what? We'll figure that out as we go. Okay, so now I've got a simple screen set up to capture name and description. What I want to do next is actually go out and prove that my Xano, come over to Xano. We will go look at the APIs and click on to do over here on the right. We are now going to be calling the post to do. This is the add to do record option. And what should happen here is, keep in mind, this was given to us when we created the table. Nice thing about Xano, they give you the create, read, update, delete, or the CRUD APIs by default, so you don't have to do anything for those. And in this case, all we're going to have to do is add in some to-do input data. Because if I look at the function stack and the add record, the created add is set to now, which will give it current date and time, and then a name and a description. And if we come up to our inputs, both of these will be text. One of them will be name. The other one will be description. Then we come back out here and look, because now we want to attach input of name and input of description. So at this point, when I save this, we should be getting, passing in name and description to this post, to the to-do. The function stack will use that to fill in a new record. And then the response, before I go to response, the output will just be what is contained in that table. It's put in a to-do variable, and that response right here will get sent back to AppGyver. So we're going to go ahead. I'm getting a little bit better at this. I'm preparing with my logins because we have authentication. So I'm going to grab the auth token and come back over here and new to do. This was just created. Okay, so when I run that, and I am now going to go out and look at the table, I switch tabs. Once again, I think I mentioned this in a prior video. I tend to like to run Xano in two tabs, one where I leave it in the APIs and the other where I leave it in the database table. This third one is just so I always have an auth token. So I switched over to my second tab. I'm going to grab the to-do table, and there's my new to-do today. This was just created. So you can see that that works in Xano correctly. So what we're going to do is come back over and build that into the data resources that are in the to-do. We obviously already have the Git collection working, and we have the Git record working because that's the detail screen. And now we're going to do the create record. For the create records, you always have to turn those on. I am getting some slow response time today. There we go. So it finally took it. Anything that has to do with creating data, AppGyver leaves off by default, so you can turn that on. And what we need to have is a schema. Because right now, ID name created at description. Cool. So we've been in here before. That's probably actually using it from the get. If I use get schema, that's why. Okay, so when I looked at this, I kind of wasn't expecting anything to be in custom object. But what it does by default in the schema is uses whatever the schema is coming back from the get, which is close to what we want, but it's more info because we're just going to pass in name and description. I'm going to switch back over to schema. This should be a regular part of what you do when you use the create post APIs. We'll do a custom schema, and we're just going to add name, leave it as text, and then we're going to add description. I'm going to go ahead and save that, which will move me off of the tab I was on. We'll come back to the create record, and now we are going to test. I think I still have, I do, still have my auth token in my clipboard. And now we are going to do another new to-do. This one was created from, except that's not really created. There we go, created from AppGyver. When I run this, it should work. There we go. So I've got a new one. I'm going to save or set my schema, so I don't forget to do that. I'm going to save overall. And just to make sure it really worked, I'm going to come back in here and use the refresh on the right. And there it is. So now we know that we are creating new to-dos from AppGyver's data resource. So now we want to do that from our screen. And to do that, we need to switch back over to variables. And we need to create a data variable that is going to be made from to-do. And so we're using, let's call it to-do underscore create. And it won't be a collection or a single data record that we're getting. This time we're going to be doing the new data record. Save that. And also by default, and we're going to have to be patient, I clicked, but I think either my internet or AppGyver, let's blame me for now, is transitioning slow between screens. Or is it? No, we're good. Data to do create. I expected something that we don't have here. The set data variable, we are going to get rid of. Actually, hold on one sec, because this actually looks different than what I expected. Okay, I just had to take the pressure of the camera off of me, I guess. So we're in to do create. When the page is mounted, we're not interested in setting any data variable into to do create because we don't have any of that information. So it's always good to come in and check your data variable and to see what it has in the flow function canvas. Because unless it's a list screen, typically you're going to delete or alter what's there. So I went ahead and deleted that. And now what we're going to do, since I have the to do create, I've got the data variable set on the screen. I also need to set in the properties of the input fields the value. And I am going to associate the data variable. And in this case, it's going to be the name that's associated, and then the description for the value. So data and variables, go into data variables, and this time we will pick description. So what I've done is associated the data that will get sent directly to the API. I didn't put it in an interim data element. I went ahead and put it directly into the data variable that's associated with the data resource. I think the next thing I need to do is actually have the submit, the component tap, create a record. So we're going to pull that out of the flow logic. And so when I click on submit, this component tap goes, the create record will be executed. I don't want it to go to do. I do want it to go to do, but I've got it, oh yeah. Since this is create record, it's automatically going to the post, and all I need to do is pick our app variable. So data and variables, app variable, we have our auth token. This has the bearer space in front of it. We did that intelligently before, and now I want to set the custom objects. So what I'm going to do is pick up from data and variables. See, all of this ties together. The to-do create. We are going to pick, which one am I in? For the description, there we go. You ever just forget where you are in this? Pretty sure. There we go. Name. Okay, so I picked the to-do create name. That took me way longer than it should have. We'll go back into data and variables, data variable, and we will more quickly pick description this time and save. So you'll see in this, the bindings for the object properties, I've set the name and the description to be the data that's getting passed to do with the auth token. And I think all I'm missing now, since we created the new screen, I just need to remember that out of the to-do list, I now simply need to attach this container. Now, keep in mind here, minor little point, but I don't want to click on the icon and have that be, because that's a smaller pressing area. I want to click on the container, and I'm going to put my component tap for the container as what will launch the screen. Okay, and we want to launch the screen that is new to do. And let's make it modal. I don't need to go into there. I just need to change the false to true. So modal will slide up. For me, when I'm showing new data, I'll tend to do a non-modal, which will slide in from the right usually. When I do something that's coming up to gather data, I biased that. I said coming up to gather data. I usually do that as a modal. There's probably some real smart usability logic somewhere that either supports or contradicts that, but that's just kind of the pattern I've taken over time. So let's go ahead and see how much of this comes together. Switch back over. So I've saved, as we can see up here. That means that I've got the new version of the screen. If I click on the green button, this slides up. If I click on the type here, call it a real test. We are really testing. And even though it's minor, it's always good to make sure you put different values in each field, because if you were to ever make a mistake and had the same data variable on both of the fields, you wouldn't know it unless you could see that the data should or should not be the same at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and submit. And we're going to go back over to Xano and see after we refresh. Hey, looky there. like always, I'm surprised that it worked. So let's do a little bit of simple cleanup here, which is not on this screen. But if I go back out to the new to-do screen, we don't want the data that we typed in, as I'll switch over here, it stays here right now, and we don't want that. So what we want to do is clear each of these out upon a successful submission. We do not want to clear them out if it's not successful, because there's nothing a user hates more than having something fail and then having to retype everything in. So we want to make sure that we're considerate of how we approach that. So here we have a create record, and we know that the top node, if we look at the outputs, is a successful response. And so what we're going to want to do is set the data variable, because that's what is bound to these fields. We're going to set this one, go back to properties from outputs, data variable name. You know what I'm interested in? I mean, you know what? I'm going to pause for a sec, because I was shared some information by one of the AppGyver folks that shows a nice, easy way to empty out an object type field without doing it one field at a time. So hold on a sec. I'm going to go find that, and I'll join right back in. Okay, I think I got it figured out. I had to go into another app real quick and make sure I understood what I was going to show you. So here's our 50% chance of getting this one right. On the submit, what we were talking about is actually in the set data variable, after a successful create record path into here, I want to set the name and the description to blank so that the screen blanks out and I don't leave the successfully created to-do text in those fields. Otherwise, you could end up duplicating your, hitting the submit again and duplicating it, and we don't want that. So what I wanted to do is to do that in one effort. I'm going to go into formula, and we are going to use a formula that's called, or a function within a formula called merge. And let me just show you what that does real quick. So given a list of objects, returns a single object. So I'm going to put in 2 objects. And it's going to return to me 1 object. And it uses all of the unique key pairs in the source object. And if there's several objects, which we'll have 2, and they will have the same keys, then the value will be taken from the last object in the list. So what we are going to do is set the first object to be our data variable, because it has, there we go, the values. And this merge structure is a list of objects. So I need to make this a list, and to do that, we are going to put brackets around it. And then we're going to have 2 items in here. And the other one is going to be name with an empty value and description with an empty value. So based on the definition of merge, since to do create and name description both have the same keys, name, description, the last one in the list is what's going to do the assignment to the returning data, which will be 2 empty values. So that's a nice way. It doesn't matter too much if it's just 2 fields like I have here. I'm going to go ahead and save this. We only have 2 fields, so it's not too big of a deal. But if you had a data element that a data resource you were creating that had 6, 8, 10 different data fields, it makes it easier to go in and do a single set point, as opposed to having 6 set data variables stacked on top of each other. So that merge function I found to be pretty handy. Hopefully you will as well. So let's go ahead and try this again. At this point, if we go back over and we do a fancy test, really, it is fancy. Okay, so when I submit this, we should see that the field goes blank if it's successful. There we go. And we know it's successful because we come over here and refresh, and there it is. So now maybe the other little cleanup thing we should do is, what do you think, maybe a toast? I don't know that I've been consistent with this, but let's just say we're going to put a toast message failed to create the to-do. Try again. So if it were to fail, at least we will give them that notification. If you remember, where was it that we did this? It was in the optional inputs. We have ourselves a toast position app variable. So we'll go into data and variables, app variable, and that is set to a 0. And it will mean that the toast will pop up right in the middle of the screen, so it is not missed. And it lasts for 2000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds, which should be long enough for them after hitting submit and seeing it to know that it failed. Also, when it fails, you notice how we're not doing any set data variable because we don't want to blank it out. It'll leave everything that they typed in so they can just hit submit again and see if it works. Okay. So to know whether or not I've done what I said I'm going to do, and I think there's still another item I want to do. We have added the to-do screen. We have, oh, you know what? I should see, do I have a way to close the screen? I can just drag it down. We, at some point, can put at the top of the screen an X to close it. Right now, we can just drag it down and everything works fine. I feel like I'm starting to get a little long on this video. Connect the button to the new screen we've done. The created by we should do, that's pretty straightforward. And then update the to-do get collection data resource. I think we've already done that, but we'll confirm that. Yeah, there's nothing new in our get collection. So that one doesn't need to be done. Oh, I see why I did it. It's almost like I knew what I was doing when I wrote the to-dos. The created by, when I add that to the table, that's why I'm updating the data resource. Okay. We're going back to Xano. In the to-do, I'm in my tab that has the database showing. I'm going to hit the plus. We are going to do a created by. It's going to be a user that creates it, obviously, and the logged in user. So I'm not doing text or integer. I'm going to do table reference to user, and it'll automatically set it up for me. Okay. So at this point, I have the user ID table reference. So I'm going to go back over to my other tab. And this is where we create. I do not need a new input. The reason for that is the auth token that we pass in has the ID info. We've used that in the past. We're going to use it again here. So I'm going to click on add record. And for the user ID, we'll scroll to what should be auth. And I would be right in the way. We'll pick ID. So now the ID of the user who is logged in will be assigned to that to-do. And I think that's actually all you have to do. You got to love the no coding world. All I had to do is change that. And I think when I come back to my app, no saving needed because it's already in Xano. We are going to, will be added, should have user who created it. Okay, so submit that. It's amazing how fast that goes. And when I come into Xano into the table and we refresh, there we go. And if we look at number 27, chances are pretty good that that is 27. So that works like a champ. We now know who created this. And because of that, hold on, let's stay in Xano. Let's look at my to-do response. Sorry, let's look at my add record and make sure that the output has user ID, and it does. So I have all the data, you know, the ID, when it was created, the name and description that was in there before, and then a user ID. So that is now getting passed back to AppGyver. So that is why we're going to the data resource for the to-do on the get collection, and we are going to do a test. I don't think there's any chance, yeah, that I still have. So let's go back to here just to pick up our auth token that we need to test this. And we are going to go into static text. Always put in bearer space. We're not going to do any filter, and we're going to run a test. And now we get user ID. Most of them will still be 0, but the last one will be 27. And I want to set that as the new schema. Now, we're not using that user ID anywhere at this time, but later on, we will add it to the detail screen, and we will add it to the create, well, not the create screen, just the detail screen probably. So that'll be for a later day, but now we have that updated, so the data's coming back. And so these last few items we get to cross off. We did update the to-do collection, the table, add data resource for new to-do to AppGyver. Yeah, so we did that earlier, adding the new to-do data resource. That one's a little out of order. So we're good. We get to get rid of this whole section. Next time, it looks like we're assigning to-do to a user. So for a good to-do app, not only are you creating to-dos, but you want to have a list of all users available to you to assign that person the to-do for them to do. So thanks again for watching, and we will pick this up next time and add in some more to-do features.